Hi everybody, Josh here. Before we get into the next episode, I wanted to drop in and plug something that's been going on for a while, but that might be especially handy for these days of self-imposed isolation and social distancing. If you find yourself getting a little stir-crazy, wanting to sling some dice with fellow Earthdawn fans, there's a West Marches-style Earthdawn game based out of the FASA Games forums. This is a campaign style that allows for easy drop-in, almost a pick-up-and-play style, with no long-term commitment and flexible scheduling. The games are run online, so you can stay inside and you don't even need to put on pants. There are more details at the website. Go to fasagames.com, go to the forums, in the Earthdawn section, look under Online Play for West Marches 2. I'll also drop a link into the show notes. With that out of the way, let's dive into the next episode.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Earthdawn Survival Guide, a podcast for novices, wardens, masters, travelers, and everybody out there who actually wants to listen to us in any way, shape, or form. I am, of course, Dan. With me is, of course, Josh.
Hello!
Before we get into anything else, real quick, we've got one email to get to a little bit later on. We will be, on this podcast today, we'll be talking about all things logistical, civilizational, powerful, and foreseeable, but Josh has a wonderful little announcement to make first. But before that happens, get a hold of us if you want to at edsgpodcast@gmail.com. Josh, the floor is yours, because you've been waiting to say something about this for a long time.
Well,
it's not the big secret.
This is not the big secret, but this is still cool regardless.
We'll burst that bubble, but give you another bubble.
We'll get to that one eventually. So, as of our recording of this, I have finished up the preliminary pre-art layout for the Iopos sourcebook. I finished that up this past weekend.
Woohoo!
And at our development team meeting last night, we kind of hashed out some final details and put some things together to prepare the Kickstarter campaign for said book. Now, at the time that this episode releases, that campaign should have launched. So if you were not already following me or FASA Games on our various social media outlets, the Earthdawn Guild on Facebook, I mean, we'll be talking about this in a bunch of places, but if you are not aware, go to Kickstarter, search for Earthdawn,
and get out from under that rock you've been living under.
And you will be able to support the campaign for Iopos. Lair of Deceit is the subtitle that we have chosen for that book. In addition to being able to get copies of the book both in print and PDF, we've got, much like in our previous campaign for Mystic Paths, basically higher tiers that are bundles of books. If you are just getting back in and have not had a chance to acquire stuff yet, this is a great time to do it because we do offer sort of discount rates off of what you would get even ordering it directly through our store. And yeah, the book is all done. The book is written and the text is basically locked down at this point. Now it's just a matter of getting art filled and whatnot. And this campaign will help pay artists to do that and pay for the physical production of the book. Because our printer, who is based in the US, also prints newspapers. And so is, at least for now, in the weird pandemic world that we live in,
COVID-19 world,
considered essential because they print newspapers as well. So they will actually be... Now, obviously, we wouldn't be getting the book to them to be printed until probably May or June, depending on how quickly art comes back. But if things are still going on at that point, they should still be able to produce the books and get them out. So go check that out, and we'll have... on our blog and at the campaign itself, we'll be offering teasers and other stuff about that.
So, yeah.
And maybe if people back if any backers who back the campaign, when it ends, will get the pre-release PDF copy, so they will immediately have access to the full text of the book to start reading and working through and enjoying. And it's possible that maybe once this campaign is wrapped, we can start talking a bit more about a certain super secret project.
Perhaps.
So
a quick summation. Kickstarter is the cheapest way to get the other books you may have missed out on.
Mm-hmm.
And the PDF, it will be out in your hot little hands before anything else. And thirdly, I just want to let everybody else know that now this gaming book has been deemed essential printing throughout the world. there you are. So that's my sales pitch.
There you go. So anyway, we're really excited to get this book on its way. And obviously, one of the other things actually that I do want to mention with regards to that, and this is talked about in the campaign info itself at Kickstarter once it goes live, or which you will see if you go and look. We decided in the midst of all of the coronavirus pandemic weirdness that's going on, that this is going to be a more stripped down and basic campaign. We are not offering a whole bunch of stretch goals or fancy add-ons or anything like that. Mainly because we understand there are a lot of people who are in perhaps uncertain economic situation as a result of this.
I are one of them.
And yeah.
I've been furloughed.
Yeah. And we don't want to ask our awesome fans we don't want them to feel like they need to throw scads and scads of money at us in order to meet these stretch goals and whatnot. We have ideas for stretch goals and such, but we've decided to kind of push them off to later campaigns, getting a sense for what's going on. So, that's why you might go and look and say, hey, what's up with add-ons and stretch goals and stuff like that. Well, it's basically we're trying to keep this simple to make life easier because the world is weird right now.
Yeah. Even though I've been furloughed, I will be backing this because I am a completist and I will have everything we do.
There we go.
On to that. We've actually got an email, and I'm going to read the funny part of the email because it's a two-parter. And Josh has allowed me to do this in a very funny voice. So, Brandon, I am going to absolutely butcher the voice you have in your head for your character because your character wrote into us. So, greetings, humans. I am Kogorsi, the giant two-headed axe master of a bunch of circles. I have arisen from a more than a 2-decade-long retirement to return to adventuring. I enjoy listening to your show and have hired a soft, fleshy human, Scribe, to transact correspondence with you. My questions are thus. Will you ever have a show about orcs in Carafad? To an orc such as myself, there is more to life than living in a cave like a dwarf or floating around on a big river. Also, your show needs more talk of very large axes! You mentioned to ask if we had any questions regarding patterns. Alas, I have none, but do hope for my own sake you are talking magical patterns and not which patterns might be fashionable in Dwarven or Tiskrang fashion circles this season. Also not a question, but I thought I would add a few words ending in Cal for Dan's benefit. Feel free to use them in the show. Thaumaturgical! I think it means something about how a magic person wiggles their fingers to do magical stuff. But what do I know? Surgical! In this instance, it refers to the orc version of surgery, which usually involves dismemberment by giant two-headed axe! I really thought I had more questions, but must have forgotten them during the headaches I must endure in resisting Gahad when people talk too much about Tiskrang and dwarves while not talking so much about orcs. Finally, I leave you with a tongue-in-cheek poem I wrote myself before my scribe leaves you with a few questions of his own, as of course it was a condition of his services. Tiskrang, like a hairless elf, but with a prehensile tail, to wield more girl swords.
Bravo.
That was the fun part.
Bravo.
So, I'm sorry, Brandon. You sent it to us, therefore I got to have fun with it. I hope you did too. I hope everybody did too.
So,
comments on my performance, knock yourself out. But Brandon's been gone for RPGs for about 25 years, so he's welcome back by all means. Welcome back to 4th edition for Earthdawn. We're glad to have you. He's got 3 or 4 questions. First one is, he knows it's been alluded to before, but will there be more FASA scenarios made for people to use, for game masters especially to use?
Yes.
Okay, part 2 of the question. Could you say what kind of timeline the Legends series is on, and how many are planned, or how often the release schedule is or would be? Or
okay, so there are a total of in the what we're kind of deeming as the first saga of the Legends of Barsave thing, a total of 16 adventures kind of sketched out. We have released in PDF 1 through 6. I don't believe 7 is actually out in PDF yet. It might be. Right. I don't recall.
I remember 6 or 8, but it's an even number.
Yeah, so to get back briefly to the Kickstarter, one of the tiers in the Kickstarter does allow you to get up through 8, because over the course of the next couple of days, I'm going to be finishing up the layout on Chapter 8, which will then be up and available in PDF and also in print. We're going to have all of those available in print as well. The ultimate goal is to try and release one of those per quarter. So for a year, which means that we're looking at probably having the full campaign done like a year and a half from now. That's assuming ideal production schedules and stuff like that. So that's kind of the plan on that. 16 chapters, although the first, like with 8 coming out, that kind of ends the break of Act 1 of the saga, and then we'll get into the next batch.
Fair.
As far as other scenarios, yes, maybe. I know that I've got 3 or 4 scenarios that I've written up for convention games that I've done at Gen Con and places like that in the past that just exist as outlines, basically, and bullet point notes for me to run from. And I would like to get some of them more fully fleshed out for release. You know, so yes, we would like to see more. There's a tough balance there. We kind of talked a little bit in a previous show about, did we talk about adventure? Like you had mentioned how you always like run your own adventures, or you run out of the pre-published stuff.
Yeah, anything that's ever been pre-published, I've run pretty much. Well, most of them.
General thing is that adventures don't tend to sell as well as people who buy adventures might think. Let me put it this way. The amount of effort that goes into making them in terms of the price point and how many end up selling, like basically the choice comes down, do we put the effort into a source book like Iopos or Mystic Paths or something like that, or put it into adventures? Now, we might be able potentially to do like 3 adventures, and I'm not talking about the legend stuff, that's its own thing, but like 3 adventures in the span of like 1 or 2 regular source books. But the pricing thing, it's rough. I would like to see more. I think adventures, even if people don't necessarily run them as they are, can serve as a valuable source for ideas and a template for what we expect an adventure to look like. You know, and I especially like to see, I would really like to see my feuding orc family romantic comedy out in print, because it is a sort of socially based adventure. And kind of a bit atypical, and I think it's cool in that regard.
And sounds hilarious.
It is. It's fantastic. That one does require a little bit more work in terms of writing it up, because there's a lot of like role playing advice and whatnot. I've got the 30th anniversary adventure that I did for Gen Con a couple of years ago that I want to get polished up and released. Like this, there are plans. It's just a matter of finding the time and energy to do them.
Yeah, fair enough. And not that any of the other already published adventures over the past 25 years, 30 years aren't out there. So there's some on the Fossa Games website. There's some you can go look at on probably eBay. I know our Drive-Thru RPG might have a couple as well. I actually left a review for one. So
all of the previous published material, not only from the original runs of stuff, but also all of the back issues of the Earth Dawn Journal, which has a few adventures in it, are
fantastic ones.
Are all available. The like shards and stuff that were done for 3rd edition, those are all available in PDF, both through the Fossa Games site and through Drive-Thru RPG. So there is plenty of stuff out there. The only thing is that the older material, you would kind of need to use as a plot outline and rework numbers in some respects. Yeah.
That's about it. So yeah, different stats, newer stats for the creatures, and just go along with the 4th edition rules and you're fine. And you're all good. So you keep 90% of it. That's still 90% effort out of your way.
Yeah.
So you're good to go there. Because he does say he has returned to tabletop from a time capsule, and he's now wondering, does everyone use PDFs nowadays? He doesn't have a tablet laptop worthy of running PDFs. I thought PDFs were like really small file size.
Relatively speaking, yeah. It's just if PDFs can be really handy if you've got a tablet.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
Any current computer, at least in Windows Vista, I think even can run PDFs.
Yeah, I mean, PDFs, PDFs is a as long as the PDF is put together correctly so it doesn't suffer from ridiculous file bloat, which I have made the mistake of doing a couple of times when making PDFs.
Whoops.
But yeah, I mean, you should be able to do them okay. The thing that I like physical books,
I am the same.
but I also like PDFs because it's very easy for me to bring the PDF up in the screen. And like if I'm looking for something while doing research on a book or whatever, to just like, you can search the PDF to find what you're looking for pretty easily and faster.
Yeah, I do the same. I do the exact same thing. Is I have my PDFs on my tablet, on a little microchip. Actually, I insert in my tablet, and that's the same thing I do with it. Is if I'm going over to somebody else's house to play, I can bring 6 or 8 books on the tablet and not carry all that weight.
Yeah,
and not mess up my books because occasionally I hit a bump in the road and covers will get bent, and I hate that.
Yeah,
so that's just me.
You know,
so
I absolutely understand people like preferring physical books. We are still doing physical books and they are available, but PDFs, especially like if you're coming back to gaming after like from the previous century, then yeah, the rise of electronic books, of PDFs, is new, but it has in many ways like really reshaped the industry. And it actually allows a lot of like indie producers and small like one-man studios and whatnot to put together stuff and put it out without needing to worry about like warehousing and managing physical product and stuff like that. You create a PDF and you can put it up on DriveThruRPG and even have them do like print on demand stuff for it if people do want to prefer for a physical copy. So no, the digital revolution has done really interesting things for the tabletop game industry. For RPGs at least. And so no, it's really cool. A lot of people like them, a lot of people don't. They have advantages and disadvantages. But yeah, no, you will find them now.
Yeah. I still take a good old fashioned office highlighter, blue, green, yellow, take your pick, and highlight the pages, important sentences, just so if I flip through the book I can find it. I can't do that on PDF as well as easily. So
yeah, you need to have the you need to have the right stuff to do that in PDF.
Yeah, I'm not paying for that software. So one of those things. Otherwise, so today's topics we're going to cover just a little bit on. Just because he asked the question, we're going to lead into that. So thank you, Brandon. Thank you for the email. Thank you for letting me absolutely butcher the voice inside your head for Kogorsi. We're going to talk about a little bit on campaign planning, story hooks, and probably the first adventure and how to put that together. Because Josh alluded to it. He's run adventures and campaigns, and I have done mostly pre-generated adventures for everyone to run with. So first question, outside of a convention, how long should somebody's first adventure be in Earthdawn? How many sessions or high points to get to, or legend awards or things like that? So what's your recommendation?
It depends. I think that if you are dealing with people who, like if you're dealing with your regular gaming group, right? Like you're playing other games, like you play D&D or various World of Darkness games or whatever, and you're trying something new and you're trying Earthdawn, doing your initial adventure to perhaps be like 2 or 3 sessions is probably a good thing, because my one issue with convention demos is that it is a very limited block of time. Like basically you have like 4 hours typically is what a convention RPG session is. And generally, especially with a game like Earthdawn, you typically have people who are new to the system, and so you got to spend the first 30 minutes like people are settling in. You've got to kind of like brief them on how the rules work and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. It gets to the point now, like at Gen Con, a lot of times I'll have people that come back to play in my games again and again, and so I will know them and know that they're up on it, but we will almost always have like a couple of new players, which is awesome every time. But that means that you've got to like kind of give them the really high concept setting description and cover the basics and kind of run through like the character sheet and say, okay, here's what the various things mean, and go from there. So that means that, you've got a 4-hour block, but you've got the settling in time and the briefing and whatnot. And you want to make sure that you're not going to be running over because people have other games and stuff that they need to get to. So generally you're really maybe looking at only 3 hours of play, which means you're really looking for a kind of focused, like specific goal, like a lot more linear and directed story than you would in maybe a traditional game where players might have a bit more freedom to wander around or take sidebars or whatever.
So convention play is point A to point B, maybe point
A to point B to point C to point D. Yeah. Like I generally will have like, there's the initial scene where they kind of get introduced to the job. I will generally have like a fairly basic, simple combat encounter really early on to give everybody a chance to like roll some dice and get a feel for what's going on.
See how the system works.
See how the system works. And then I'll have a scene or two that tends to be more investigate. I mean, it depends on the particular story I'm running, but that will be like investigative or will have stuff that will allow the non-combat aspects of the characters to maybe come into play, whether that's social interactions or whatever. And then typically there will be like some kind of climactic fight or other at the end.
Yeah.
To kind of wrap things up. So if you're playing at home with your normal group or some newer people or whatever, you can maybe like expand on that a little bit, and go into a bit more depth and maybe do like 2 or 3 sessions of 3 to 4 hours each, depending on what people's things are. You still probably will typically want to go with something as your first adventure. If you're new to Earth Dawn, you've got players that are new to Earth Dawn, to be a bit more focused and specific goal oriented, because when you don't know much about the setting, it can be a little bit floundering. You can flounder around in terms of not knowing what you can do and stuff like that. That's part of the reason why the Legends of Barsave adventures are kind of designed the way that they are. One, each of them is kind of written to be a single session. Like they're conceived as the convention scenarios that Kyle and Michael and Carl run at conventions.
Yeah.
But they can very easily be, because they end up with recurring NPCs and stuff, because they're all kind of set in and around the same place. Those can very easily be expanded by a home campaign, or have other like sidebars that go in and get set up in the same place as well to kind of flesh that out. So I would say, like, for your first adventure, if you're just starting out, if you're newer, then maybe having a more GM-focused, GM-dictated sort of plots to follow might be a little bit easier to keep people from floundering. If you are starting a new campaign, but you've got experienced people, then that kind of goes out the window. And at that point, you really want your initial session or two to be that session 0 negotiation. Well, what do we want the game to be about? Where are we going to set it? What kind of characters do people want to do? And have that back and forth where the players, being familiar with the setting, are able to perhaps be a little, offer a bit more creative input into the shape that the campaign's going to take.
Fair. Yeah. If you needed a good example, and I actually left a review of this on Drive-Thru RPG many, many years ago, way before the podcast, I found in the Earth Dawn Journal number 2, David Carolay, I hope you're pronouncing your last name properly, wrote an adventure called The Search for Wisdom. And it later got turned into a shard for 3rd edition, called Runevir's Tomb. And I have run...
Yep. We talked about this on the show in the past.
Adventure, I think 5 times now, because it is one of the perfect examples.
It's a solid little adventure.
Of introductory adventure.
That's a good one. If you can track down the original 1st edition demo packets.
Yeah.
The adventure in there is like really, really kind of like simple and straightforward.
Incredibly, but it works.
But yeah, so that's the one with Farless's dagger, kind of first appeared in there. And the 30th anniversary adventure basically is a sequel to that. It's actually 25th anniversary, whatever it is, the anniversary adventure I did a couple years ago.
Oh, Targ Bone Slicer. Nice.
But then, yeah, there are other like one-shots and shards and things like that are around that can definitely serve.
And if all else fails, as Josh has always said, borrow and steal. If you've got a novel or a movie, a plot that you want, translate that to Earth Dawn if you have the time and the energy and resources to do so. My only other recommendation, seriously, is for your first adventure, if it's a brand new party, all new players to Earth Dawn, they've maybe played other games before, but they haven't played Earth Dawn yet, is total up the points you're planning on handing out, session awards, creatures, treasure, all that fun stuff, and don't let them circle up too fast, as in they'll go from first and just blaze all the way through to 3rd or 4th. Try and keep it like first to second. Let them get used to what they can do at 2nd before they get any more points, and then run something else and get them enough points to get to 3rd. And then just kind of make sure they go one circle at a time.
One of the advantages of the skill-based circle advancement of Earthdawn, it really allows players who are newer to the system to not get overwhelmed too much by what their characters can do. You start off with 5 or 6 abilities, and most of them at first circle tend to be fairly straightforward. And then as you advance in circle, you get more and more kind of added on a little bit at a time.
And even spells, same thing. You don't get a whole lot.
Yeah, and with spells and things like that. So there definitely is a nice learning curve in that regard. And yeah, you can like advance through the first couple of circles pretty quickly if you know what you're doing.
Yeah. So try and aim for like the 1,500 point range, because really I think 1,200 or 1,300 is all you need to get from first to second circle, right? Any more?
First, if you are really focused on just advancing to circle, you can actually, depending on how you build your character, you can advance from first to second with like 300 legend points. If you take your 8 starting talent points and you take 4 talents at rank 2, and then you take your 5th talent, rank 1 is 100, rank 2 is 200, there's your 5 talents at rank 2 that qualify you for second circle.
Yeah.
So it's possible to qualify with as little as 300 legend points. Now, of course, then at that point, you're not spending any legend on advancing an attribute. That's no longer tied to circle the way that it was in earlier, in first edition, where it was. Generally, you would end up with like around 1,000 or so if somebody really wanted to bump up an attribute when they advanced.
Yeah.
They would save the points to do that. But yeah, I mean, it is possible to like advance those first couple of circles really, really quickly if you are focused on doing it. The other thing that I would say, aside from the mechanics of looking at advancement, because it's certainly possible that you might just be trying out Earthdawn as a interlude or like mini series in between whatever of your regular gaming, in which case you're not going to be delving too much into the like long-term campaign aspects of Earthdawn, like the exploration of thread items and stuff like that.
Yeah.
If you are introducing people, whether the entire group is new or you've got new players, and this is one of the things that I try and do with the convention scenarios that I come up with, is try and incorporate into those initial adventures, if you're coming up with your own, those initial sessions, to highlight some of the things that are special and unique about Earthdawn. Especially if you've got people who are coming from a Dungeons & Dragons background, highlighting the things that are different compared to D&D.
By different, he means better.
Well, I mean, you're not wrong, but
I'll sell it hard. Josh will soft sell
it. But trying to highlight those differences is I think something that's really cool in a way of getting people kind of hooked on it. It's not quite as easy to do these days as it was, although with masks you can do it easily enough. Like the classic D&D player coming to Earthdawn and facing a cadaver man for the first time, right? They kind of like, yes. Oh, well, I'm like a low-powered character, and I'm going up basically against something that looks like a zombie, and then they hit it hard, and it goes bananas on them. That is always a remarkable, memorable moment. I love dropping cadaver men on new players in my games whenever I was introducing them.
I did that 3 days ago.
Because they would do... Yeah, because they do different things. And while the Cadaver Man, as presented in the GM's Guide in 4th edition, is a little bit tough for first circle characters, you can modify the numbers down or something like that. But yeah, just trying to highlight the special things, maybe introducing the passions or something like that, or the horrors in some respects. Although you're probably, as an introductory thing, not going to be dealing with really powerful horrors, but maybe just some kind of like nasty, gribbly monster thing that is causing problems in an area.
Yeah. Or at least will freak him out to look at. So, that thing. Yeah, that's not anything they were expecting. No, the Cadaver Man I threw at somebody on Sunday, second session ever, first Cadaver Man at Earthdawn, D&D player for many years. They were like, oh, okay, I can just outrun this thing. No, look at the movement rate. This is the fast-moving zombie, air quotes, that will catch you. And then did enough damage to wound it, and that was the 4 attacks per turn. Oh, yeah, I just sat there and just raked him. I'm like, oh, okay, so they had a nice little shock of, oh, this is not what you expected. Here we are. So I coincidentally today read an article in Knights at the Dinner Table magazine, not to plug them, but they do have some wonderful gaming resources every once in a while. And they had about 9 different places you can get one night stand or 2 night stand, 1 session or 2 session gaming adventures for game masters to kind of create. And they basically just said, go to Board Game Geek, go to Reddit, for low prep, quick to learn, one-shot RPGs, go to Sky Flourish, go to the Angry GM, Myth Creance, MYTH Creance, Gnome Stew, RPG Alchemy, plenty of places you can go find some things to help you write your first adventure or a quick little one-shot, 2-shot thing out there. So for campaign planning, I figure that's not a bad resource either to toss out for everybody, just to help out where they want to go. So that's the first adventure. How long should a regular campaign be? When's the last time you ran a long campaign?
Last long campaign I ran was a while ago. We ended up wrapping that up around the time that my older daughter was born.
Fair.
Just because of
logistics of that.
Babies.
Yes.
Babies and toddlers and so forth.
Yes.
And she turns actually 13 on Friday. So no, like in terms of like an actual honest to goodness long-term campaign, it's probably been a good 10 years, give or take.
Fair.
Since I've done that.
Yeah.
How long should it take, sort of being the question, as long as it needs to?
As long as you can keep them interested, I think is the thing.
Yeah.
If they get to the table and go, why are we here again? Maybe wrap it up a little quicker.
Yeah. Largely, like, the games that I've had tend to wrap up and kind of, rather than ending on a satisfying conclusion, have tended to kind of, like, fade out through a combination of life changes and burnout and things like that. As long as it needs to be. You can run a really long-term game of Earth Dawn. There is certainly the ability to do so in terms of not just like the time it takes to advance and stuff like that.
I ran the entire par-length boxed set of adventures and some little tiny things in between. And that took me... We played weekly, almost. There were some times we didn't actually play, but we played weekly. So I'd say we played 40 or 45 times that year. And that ran through the whole box set. So it took me a year to run through that. 4 long-ish adventures.
That's one of those things that maybe, again, would come up in the sort of discussions at the beginning, at the planning and those session 0 times, where you're getting a sense of, okay, do we want to do a like more focused story? Do we want something that's going to be kind of maybe sandboxy and open-ended and stuff like that? Certainly the advantage of a long-term campaign, especially in Earth Dawn, is twofold. One is you really get the opportunity to explore and take advantage of the long-term stuff and downtime activities relating to thread items and things like that. And also Earth Dawn Barsave is in some respects, a living setting, and you have the opportunity to have the players involved as they are erstwhile legends, and as they grow in power and become more and more movers and shakers in the setting, they can effect change, which always kind of makes things difficult from a game designer developer standpoint, because as people have their own campaigns, they kind of maybe diverge from what we had in mind. But that's cool.
Yeah, fair.
I think a year or two, if you're meeting weekly or every other week or something like that. I mean, I'm not running it, but the Legends of Earth Dawn podcast game that I'm involved with has now been going on for a couple of years. We only meet monthly, so like we don't get to play as much as I think anybody would actually like, but scheduling scheduling sessions for busy adults is difficult when you've got everybody in the same city, when you've got people across multiple time zones and
states,
all of that sort of thing. It can get a little bit rough.
Yeah, fair. Okay, so we are halfway through our show. Should we talk patterns since we didn't get any questions, or do you just want to move on to humans?
Let's just move on to humans. And before we dive into that, if anybody has like again, like with anything that we discuss here, if you have particular questions or advice or anything like that that you want to toss our way, feel free to drop us a line.
We love specifics. Yeah. Once again, edsgpodcast@gmail.com. But we love specifics. If you have specifics about, hey, I did this with the spell or this pattern didn't quite, throw those at us. We can answer those questions. Primarily Josh.
You know, there's a bunch of stuff that I could go into with regards to magic items, thread items in a campaign, but I think maybe we'll save that for an episode where we're focused on magic items specifically.
Sounds like it. So, Brandon, to your dismay, we are not talking orcs today. We will be talking humans. Soft, fleshy, pink-skinned humans. Kidding. I love the fact that in Earth Dawn, you have all these special races, the Windlings and the Dwarves and the Obsidian and the Trolls and the Orcs, and the T'Skrang especially. We covered T'Skrang in loving detail. But it's not like they just cast humans inside and said, they're ordinary, ignore them. No. The humans get one thing nobody else gets, which makes them just as viable as the other 7 name-giver races, which is versatility.
Yes.
And that, I find, is the equalizer where initially I'm picking up the game, I'm like, humans, I don't want to play humans. I play enough humans in every other game are out there. But this is the one that would make me want to play a human again because they get something nobody else gets. And so that makes them unique among the otherwise unique races. So
yeah, the humans, the racial talent of versatility is interesting. Certainly at the time that Earth Dawn originally came out back in the early 90s, you often see in fantasy games and sci-fi games and stuff like that have humans, that they are typically the dominant and most numerous race.
Star Wars.
Things are sort of and things are sort of talked about them in regards to why they might have gotten to that position of power or that presence within the setting without much in the way of mechanical reinforcement of that, perhaps. But the versatility talent basically, basically it just gives humans the ability to, rather than needing to follow an entirely new discipline, it allows them to pick up the odd talent or two that they might find useful in the course of their adventuring career. Now, versatility does pose potential balance problems, both in a sort of actual like gameplay situation as well as from a developer standpoint. I think I've mentioned this before.
Yes.
When we're coming up with new talents, like we need to consider how it might interact with every other talent that's out there because somebody might pull it up, grab it under versatility.
Yes.
And put together combinations.
It does make for the everything-a-thon.
Yeah. Now, versatility does have some downsides, and there have been some things that have kind of tried to control its impact, but it is certainly possible for a dedicated person to kind of potentially break things with versatility if they are dedicated and interested in doing so, especially if they can run roughshod over a GM to get what they want.
Yeah, this is... So I reread the Denizens of Earth Dawn Volume 1 section on humans yesterday just to prep for the show because, again, I got furloughed. I had time. But I forgot this part, and that's why I go back and reread things. The essay that was written is that the claim by humans is that they were the only race many thousands of years ago, and then magic happened again, and then that splintered off, and we got T'Skrang and orcs and trolls and everything else. So all of the other races are born from human. That's why humans have versatility, is because they essentially are linked to all those other races. They have
within them the potential for everything else.
So long before cultural appropriation happened, humans had versatility. Or at least mechanical appropriation. How's that? But otherwise, for human culture, because we talked about the T'Skrang culture, talked about Dwarven culture and so forth, in Earth Dawn back in 1993, they still had the equality among the sexes for males and females being in charge of things, taking care of the household, other jobs, adventuring, all that fun stuff. But there is an underlying insecurity and jealousy, unconscious jealousy and unconscious insecurity for the humans. So they're always trying to prove that they're better than whatever race happens to be around them at the time. So it's just...
there is not a dominant human culture. the way that
No.
there is sort of with dwarves or with Diskrang, which we've talked about before. Humans will typically take on the aspects of whatever culture that they are sort of a part of, which would be primarily Throlic unless there is a reason otherwise. Like humans who might live in what is otherwise an elf village might be more sort of elven in their outlook. That, you know, it's not, there are not monocultures. There are some subgroups of tribal heritage groups of humans that have sort of backgrounds and stuff that go along with that.
6 to be exact. Yes.
Yeah. You've got the Dingani tribesmen who are your sort of nomadic plains sort of wilderness types. They kind of strike me a little bit perhaps as borrowing a little bit from American First Nations, but without that like really blatant aspect. Maybe with a little bit of the Rangers of the North from Lord of the Rings kind of flavor to them, that they feel like very kind of like ranger wilderness nomadic people. Maybe with a little bit of I forget whether, because I did not read the book ahead of time because I work in the healthcare industry and therefore
you are busy.
I've been busy. That I'm not sure whether there's anything in there about the relationship between the Dingani and the orc nomads, whether that is something, but that could be an interesting aspect to explore if you're going to have that group in your game.
Absolutely.
Whether, like, do the Dingani perhaps borrow or have some things in common with orc culture because they're both sort of nomadic folk in that regard, or is there a rivalry because they would be like competing for resources? Like there's those kind of potential aspects that you can involve.
Yeah, because the Dingani have 5 laws, and they primarily migrate between between Kratos in the center of the map almost, and the mist swamps down near the southern part. So they just kind of go north and south. They're very tall, very muscular. They're very orc-like as far as their appearance is concerned, but they do have a set of laws because they lived in a care, didn't like it, and they don't want to ever be
tied down or
within walls ever again. So that's just one of the 6 that they've got. Then there's the Cathans. Remember the Cathans?
Right. Yes. The tribesmen in the jungle.
Yes.
In the Servos jungle.
Yeah. Very olive skin, mostly hairless.
They are more, for lack of a better term, more primitive than the dominant sort of culture and whatnot. They actually did not take protect themselves with the Theron rights. They used their own magics and kind of hid in tunnels underneath the jungle and survived that way. But they are a more primitive, and I'm not crazy about that word, but I'm thinking of like maybe sort of like Amazon jungle tribes kind of.
Yeah, no, that's a good
stuff like that.
Perfect way to put it. I think the phrase that stuck out with me yesterday was they emerged from after the Scourge like nothing had ever happened and went right back to being who they were. Right back in the jungle.
Very in tune with nature and their environment. Beastmasters are, very common among them. Stuff like that.
Yeah. Then there's the Galeb Klek.
They're sort of generic. I feel like they're kind of generic humans in some respects.
They are, because the Galeb was one tribe, the Klek was another tribe, and then they interbred.
And they just kind of interbred, and there's not really any strong, like, I didn't, unlike the Dingani or the Cathan tribes of the Servos, the Galeb Klek don't have, like, it's more of a, hey, here's a story of how there were 2 different tribes and they kind of blended together and that's fine. And there's no real strong, like, cultural signifier or thing that kind of ties to them as a unique group.
I agree.
And so it's like, yeah, these are the humans from this area, and like they have kind of this history, and they're humans.
I think they had a word count to fill, and that was part of it. That's just me, and I can say that 25 years after the fact. Then you get the last 3. The Riders of the Scorched Plains. They're just thieves and road bandit humans. That's pretty much what they do.
Yeah.
There's no culture. They're not quite like the troll Sky Raiders, which do it for honor and for their own sense of, well, the strong need to prove that they're strong. And if you can defend yourself, you're strong, and we'll leave you alone.
They're Scorchers, but they're human.
Yeah. So
basically,
again, I think they had space to fill in the essay. Then there's the Scavians.
They are the bargemen, the barge riders. Their ancestral home was near the mist swamps and was lost, and now they are kind of nomadic, but aquatically nomadic, and they don't get along with the Tiskrang.
No, they really don't. And they also hang out somewhere in the Scarlet Sea. Mostly about them is they all have long hair, they all wear scars, and they love jewelry. So that was the main thing I got from them.
There's a little bit of a Romani vibe to them. In the sense of them being like sort of nomads and having that aspect and avoiding a lot of the common tropes of that cultural group is used in RPGs. I think they take enough to get that impression, but avoid a lot of the damaging stereotypes that go along with that.
Fair. And then, of course, there's the Vorst.
There's the Vorst. The Vorst are the other ones that, I mean, the Scavian bargemen have a kind of strong thing with their aquatic aspect of it. And the Vorst these are the people descended from a particular care, and their care got breached, but they survived. Like, they basically turtled up and fought back and survived.
And
that had a very strong influence on their cultural development and the way they still are now, decades later after
they take no
their
prisoners,
care having...
They leave nothing to chance, and they have a scorched earth policy, essentially.
Yeah, they are very stoic and have little sense of humor and are, I want to say like kind of like doomsday prepper attitude about them. Is that they kind of deal with that. So, these are all little subgroups, and certainly within within that you can come up with your own. I mean, the chapter doesn't even talk about Landis at all, which was a primarily human kingdom.
I agree with you. Because the records of Landis all detailed the 6 different, I can't say versions of humans, but 6 different, slightly, as you said, subcultures that can be found throughout Barsave, but it doesn't really mention humans as a whole.
Right. There's no monoculture. And I think the humans are a really good example of what you can do to make different groups distinct and special. And you don't necessarily need to deal with all of them, but it does allow the possibility of somebody who might want to play a human to bring in some role-playing aspects in terms of how they might want to be as a character, because humans are quite often, as you mentioned, viewed as kind of like bland and boring and middle of the road. And not only that, not only do they have the cool versatility, racial ability, but here are half a dozen like different variations that each have their own like hook and idea and whatnot that can inform your play and development of the character.
Because if you've been playing Earthdawn as long as you and I have, which is forever, if you're looking for a challenge and you've not played a human yet, go play a human, A, and then B, go try and just do the ROLE playing of any of those 6 that we just listed off. That
or come up or work with your GM to come up with one of your own.
Yeah, because
if you're looking at a longer term game, that could perhaps be one of the things that you like work out in that initial session discussion and whatnot about what's going on. And of course, you could also play a human that is from an area that is dominated perhaps by Throllic culture, or maybe lives up near the Bloodwood and has some elven influence, or is from a river village that was closely like one of the features of humans is their flexibility and adaptability.
Assimilation.
And so outside of the examples given for those various subgroups, you can, I want to play a human, but is influenced by this culture because they maybe grew up in a river village. And so there's a lot of like Tiskrang influence in that area and whatnot.
Yeah. I've always told people, because when I get them to approach Earthdawn, usually willingly, 9 times out of 10 willingly, okay, pick a race or pick a discipline, because you have to pick a discipline kind of first sometimes because in the old editions, there were racial restrictions. So I said, you have to pick your discipline first, then you get to pick your race. So back that out now, we're in 4th edition. I still am able to look at people and say, okay, because they're like, I don't want to necessarily be shoehorned into the archer's path, even though they have options. And so it's more flexible in 4th edition. I say, look, if you want to play anything, You can put it together yourself. You can piecemeal everything you want to do, all your talents and everything else. Play a human with versatility, and you're done. That's it. Because that way you get to literally pick and choose all of your talents. End of story,
the original
from the get-go.
Yeah.
And that leaves them wide open.
The one potential downside that you run into by going into versatility a lot, and this is sort of talking about from a mechanic standpoint, is that you're going to be going broad and not deep, because it does cost you not only have to increase your rank in versatility to pick up additional talents on that, you need to raise those talents, and those don't count towards your circle advancement in your discipline. And so you might end up being a little bit, depending on how much you go into it, you might end up being a little bit behind your companions in terms of your advancement, and maybe, missing out on a little bit behind the curve in terms of special abilities. I don't think it's too bad.
Yeah.
But it is certainly possible to make perhaps some ill-informed choices early on going into a human and trying to focus on versatility, and end up maybe not happy with where you are in comparison to your friends.
Yeah.
I don't think it's...
Yeah. I don't usually suggest it as a first character they ever make, but it's an option. Because it's the human journeyman.
Yeah, the original version of the journeyman was basically, okay, you is a completely like free-form, pick whatever talents you want progression kind of thing. Yeah.
There could not be a blanker slate than that one.
And while it does potentially offer some overboard combinations, it doesn't support playing a caster particularly well, because there's so much that involved in playing a caster that so many of your versatility slots need to be taken up by things to make you an effective caster. You might as well just play a caster, right? So the 4th edition Journeyman has been altered pretty dramatically in the sense that it is now a path that gets added on to your existing discipline and gives you a lot more flexibility and a lot more options with your versatility as a human. So that's a little bit better. Yeah, I mean, basically the reason that anybody would wanted to play a journeyman really was because of the morphism talent, which is a talent that as you progress through it in 1st edition, basically gave you the racial modifiers of different races progressively more and more as your rank in it advanced, to the point where a high circle journeyman with a high rank in morphism would have the like strength adjustment of an obsidian, the toughness adjustment of a troll, the perception dexterity of an elf, the perception, willpower, and charisma of whatever is best. And so ending up with it's a huge amount of work and a lot of legend points to actually get to that point. But it allows you to modify your stats well beyond what is otherwise possible.
But the truly dedicated will find a way.
The truly dedicated will find a way. It is still available in the Journeyman Path in the Mystic Paths book, because it is kind of iconic, but it's been changed a little bit in terms of how it works.
But it is still there. So coming up on an hour or so we should probably wrap this one up here pretty quick. We should talk stats for humans.
I mean, there's nothing really to say as far as that. Yeah, I mean, the humans have the sort of base 10s across the board. They do have a slight advantage on karma, that they've got the karma modifier of 5. So they do end up with a little bit more karma compared to dwarves and elves. They get the same karma modifier as orcs. They don't get the physical bonuses that orcs get, but they also don't get the penalties that orcs get as well. So
there's that.
Average across the board, second best karma in the game. Basically behind only windlings and equal with orcs. So the humans do actually get a little bit of a advantage in that regard. And of course, if you are really looking to kind of go crazy, a human magician, a spellcaster, picking up thread weaving of other magician disciplines under versatility does allow you to cast spells from multiple disciplines without needing to go to all the bother of learning another discipline. It is not as broken as you might think, because while you do have potentially have a lot more spells that you can cast, in combat, you are still limited by your number of
Yeah.
spell matrices. And so you only have a certain amount available at a time. But no, humans are decent. There's nothing super remarkable about them in the setting the way that there are perhaps with the dwarves or the Tiskrang,
The Windlings.
or others that we will talk about, or the Windlings, others that we will talk about in the future. But the human characters can be a very solid choice if there is nothing specific, like if there is no particular reason that you feel called to another race. Picking up a human, you might not be able to start quite as high as a character of a different name giver race that is more focused, unless you're looking at a real, like, trying to maximize your, like, physical combat prowess compared to, say, like a troll or an Obsidian or even an orc. Human doesn't actually end up that far behind other name givers, particularly in that regard. So yeah, it's worth looking into. Good karma, and the versatility can be really handy, especially if you've got a smaller group, to pick up the odd talent or two to fill in gaps that might not be covered by the disciplines that your companions follow.
And it's not fair to name him Jack because he would be a jack of all trades. That's just not fair. Sorry, bad joke.
So yeah, I mean, give humans a try.
If you haven't already.
If you haven't already, they are a decent choice for many things. And while not as culturally iconic within the setting the way some others are, their versatility and whatnot make them a pretty solid choice for just about anything.
Yeah, I can't see anything wrong with playing a human. It's, for me, it's never been my first choice, but it will be a choice eventually. So I played
a human warrior in one game who, like, part of his story was that he grew up on the tales of his uncle who was like a mercenary swordsman or whatever, and was all like in love with the romantic ideal of the wandering hero. And then sort of got into his first adventure and realized that, adventuring is kind of a unpleasant, like, there's a lot of nasty stuff that the stories really don't tell you, and coming to terms with that. So that was a cool little arc to go on.
Well, and I also, going back to culturalism real quick, I find that since the Tiskrang are so fleshed out, as far as a culture is concerned, and the dwarves are very fleshed out as far as a culture is concerned. Trolls as well. Just about everybody is. Even the Obsidian, as low in population as they are, still have a culture all their own and cultural assimilation. Humans are more of that blank slate. So if you are a player who doesn't necessarily want to try and be shoehorned into a culture or even representing a culture or playing like that, yeah, humans are your blank slate.
Humans can certainly do that. Yeah.
So yeah, that's where to go with that one.
And I assume that most of the people listening to this are humans, and so therefore, it's not much of a stretch to, step into those shoes.
Exactly. If you're new to role playing in general, start with a human in Earth Dawn at least. So go from there. Yeah, because they're pretty much. It's why in Star Wars I never played a human, because they're so ubiquitous and everywhere. I'm just kind of like, it's been done.
Well, and in many of the Star Wars games, I can't really address the Fantasy Flight Edge of Empire ones that uses the funky dice. I've played it once, but I've never looked into the details. But humans, I don't recall that in the West End Games version, which is the one I'm sort of familiar with, though I haven't looked at it in probably 20 years. That there's nothing special about humans other than the fact that, they can maybe get around. They don't stand out the way that other alien species would because they're human, and the Empire is dominated by humans. And so there's an advantage there. But there's nothing mechanically, as I recall. I could be wrong.
No, I play the West End Games version. I play the D20 version for Star Wars. Yeah, there's nothing mechanically different about being a human in those games. And even in Earth Dawn, if you want to blend in with the crowd, dwarves are the most populous race in Earth Dawn. Orcs are second and only barely ahead of humans. So dwarves, orcs, and humans are the three most populous races in all of Earth Dawn, I think making up almost 65% of the entire
something
population.
along those lines.
So, because it's 18 and 16, 34 plus 33. So yeah, 68%, 67%. So yeah,
humans aren't
humans
aren't necessarily like flashy and like super iconic, but they've got their good points. And I think we've kind of like maybe gone around and around on that a couple of times now.
Hey, look, it's a horse. It's dead. We're still beating it. No.
With that, I think we will call this one
wrap this one up.
Wrapped up.
Yeah. So we've covered an email and
talked about some initial like adventure prep and adventure planning and new campaigns starting.
Short campaigns,
whatnot.
First game, long
talked
campaign,
about humans,
stuff like that. Some kind of game prep, a little bit, and covered humans. So Brandon, we'll get to orcs soon. Not as soon as you'd like, but we'll get to them
there
soon.
eventually.
So, sorry about that.
And we
we
will talk about Carafod probably as a separate thing at some point as well.
Oh, totally. Yeah. We'll do a whole section on Carafod, a whole section on Parlane and all that. It's coming, so stay tuned.
Lots of stuff to go over.
Should be
in the meantime,
stay subscribed.
If you wish to send us correspondence, you can send an email, edsgpodcast@gmail.com.
What was that again?
Like edsgpodcast@gmail.com. Subscribe if you haven't. Rate and review if you don't mind. If such is an option on the podcasting platform that you use.
Oh, and I will make one other suggestion. The FASA Discord channel, probably at this moment, since everybody is quarantined, at least in many, many countries across the world, can probably hook you up with some players or game masters who might be in need of some downtime.
Yes. Yeah, we've got the FASA Discord got a reasonably cool group of folks, maybe looking up for pickup games. There is a dice roller bot on the channel that handles the Earth Dawn, the 4th edition step system, and has like initiative tracker and like all kind of bunch of useful stuff in that. Definitely check that out. And of course, check out the Kickstarter, the Iopos Lair of Deceit Kickstarter, which is running as of the release of this episode, should be running now. That being basically through April of 2020, April of 2020. Here we are in the midst of the COVID-19 global pandemic and all of the weirdness that is resulting from that. Get a little bit of escape. Get yourself a new book. Don't obviously financially hamstring yourself. The books will be available outside of the Kickstarter. It's just this is basically how we get the funding to finish the production of the book and get physical copies made.
Other than that, folks, we're done for now. We'll see you in a couple weeks or so. Otherwise, thank you for listening. Thank you, Josh, for making the time. Time to go make your own legend and stay healthy.
Yes, please. Wash your hands.
6 feet of separation.
Get rid of the dread iota.
Yes, and then go make your legend.
Good night.